it's also in Pat Kerwin's book, Take Your Eye Off the Ball. FBI just stands for football intelligence. That's what it stands for. So it's just how, you got some players that are physical freaks, and then you got others that they don't measure, they don't test out that well, but it just seems like they're always in the right place at the right time. Seems like they're a half a step ahead of everyone else, right? That's what FBI is being able to diagnose the play in front of you. Another term, like on the offensive side for a wide receiver, if someone's got a high FBI, they may be able to read the defense, read off coverage a little bit better than the average wide receiver, and be able to understand the DB splits and understand the technique they're playing with, so you can get a little bit of leverage, breaking a route off at 8 yards instead of 10 or 13 yards instead of 15, knowing that what the defense is running. It's just football intelligence is essentially what it is. So anything you want to add to that there, Tim? Because it applies to every facet of the game.
Oh, for sure. First thought that comes to my mind is obviously defensive side of the ball. I think probably the best, most shining example of a defensive player on the Packers with high FBI is Xavier McKinney. You just watch him play there on the back end. He has the ability to be anywhere and everywhere on the field at the right time, and it's because how much of the game that he really understands and what we're trying to do. So that'd probably be the first name on the defensive side I'd think of for sure. But yeah, man, that's awesome.
Randy Steen in the chat, I think he's trying to figure out if he was one of the winners of the autographed Lucas Van Ness card. Randy, whoever won it was in the Patreon group, and the only name is Randy. There's 2 Randys in there. One's got a last name, and the other is just Randy. The one that's just the single name Randy, that was the winner that got drawn. However, it was the second place winner. So Damon Stewart was the first place winner. We already reached out to him. We haven't heard back from him yet. So if you are that Randy in there, and again, the way to confirm that is just shoot me a direct message on Patreon from that account. And like I said, there's only one account in there that just got the first name Randy. Nonetheless, Greg S. already reached out. He was the third place winner. So if it isn't you in the Patreon group with that just single name Randy, then Greg S. would be the winner if we don't hear from that Randy. So we'll get that all ironed out. Like I said, I reached out to Damon today. If we don't hear from him by Wednesday, we'll go with the second or the third place there. So appreciate you reaching out, pal. All right. So this next question here, Tim, this comment question from Jerry, I'm excited to get into. Anytime we could talk a little scheme, right? And she says, what is a boot scheme, Clayton? I hear that a lot. Also, thanks for the podcast. Okay. So a boot scheme, if you were to stamp what the Shanahan system is, the Kyle Shanahan system, which keep in mind, you got to kind of go back in history a little bit to understand how this all evolved. And I've talked about this several times on the pod, but just kind of in passing and not specifically. But thank you, Randy. Appreciate you, pal. So you got to go back to the origin of this scheme. And I'm going to try to do it in a not so wordy way, but you guys remember Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan's dad. He worked for the San Francisco 49ers, okay? So he came up in a West Coast offense. So he ends up taking the job in Denver, okay? He takes the job in Denver, and I can't remember what year it was. It might have been around 95. It might have been a little bit earlier. Whenever he took the job in Denver, it was probably a little earlier, to be honest with you. But when he took the job in Denver, he hired a gentleman by the name of Alex Gibbs, who was an offensive line coach who had been with several NFL teams, okay? Now, let's pause Mike Shanahan for a second and talk Alex Gibbs. Alex Gibbs was the father, the guy who created, the godfather, if you will, of the wide zone, not wide zone, but zone blocking scheme in the run game. Okay, up to that point, most of the teams would just play gap run, right? And then he got the idea of, why don't we go with smaller offensive linemen that are more agile, and let's block to a zone, knowing that their agility, their athleticism will be able to beat defensive linemen to the point of attack, and also use the leverage or over aggressiveness of the defensive front to put us in an advantageous place to be able to get outside, right? And then it evolved into inside zone and all that, but you're blocking to a zone with smaller offensive linemen. I think it was Stank was his name, Mark Schlereth. He was on that Denver Broncos offensive line.
Yep.
You guys remember when Terrell Davis just went absolutely ham on the league, rushed for 2,000 yards, if I remember correctly, right? That was the scheme they used. He was great at patience, get out wide, and then use the cutback. So what you do is you're showing an outside zone blocking scheme, okay? And then as the defense over pursues, you cut back off of it. Now you got a cutback lane. That's essentially how the Alex Gibbs blocking scheme came about. Now, Ed Madden asked a great question here. Didn't Alex Gibbs coach the Hogs in Washington? He did not. Alex Gibbs, I don't even know if he's related to Coach Joe Gibbs. Joe Gibbs was the head coach in Washington, okay? Alex Gibbs, they may be related, they may not. I don't think he was in Washington with Coach Gibbs, okay? But he was with several different teams as an offensive line coach, assistant, all that stuff. He was actually with the Kentucky Wildcats way back in the day as a coach, an assistant way back in the day. So anyway, Alex Gibbs, zone blocking scheme. So Shanahan says, you know what? Why don't we implement that zone blocking scheme in our run game while also having the backbone and the structure of a West Coast offense? So it becomes a zone blocking West Coast offense is essentially what it did. Now, when we say boot scheme, you're talking about running wide zone and then play action booting off of it. So you're getting the whole defense moving in a direction where you can use a cutback lane with a running back, but also you get them moving in one direction and then you fake the handoff and bootleg off the other side. That's what John Elway did so well with his mobility, ability to throw on the run, all those things, right? So again, that's what we're talking about here. Now I'm going to drop this down, Tim, and we're going to, and thanks to everybody for the Patreon questions, we're going to pull it up here for Jerry and show an illustration of what we're talking about. All right. So here we've got our telestrator with our little handy dandy playbook. All right. I'm going to kill my camera too, because I'll probably have to get kind of close. So we're just going to show you an 11 set here, because that's what we run the majority of the time, right? And what we're going to come out in is a tray left ace set, okay? And again, what does tray left mean? Hopefully you can see my cursor. Yeah, so you see the Y is in the 3, okay? He's one of the 3 that are to the left. If he was a receiver, we'd call it trips. Instead, it's called tray, okay? So you got your slot receiver, your Z, and your Y on that side of the field. You're in an ace set, which means a single back set, all right? That's how we're setting this up here. Let me zoom in just a touch. I got to make sure I keep that active there. Okay. So when we're talking about a wide zone scheme, right, this is what the blocking scheme would look like. So if we were to take this player here and say we're going to run a wide zone blocking scheme. So let's say we're going to run a stretch left, Tim. These guys are going to block, right, to an area rather than a gap. They're blocking all to the left, right? So you're getting this huge blocking scheme here, right? And then you're blocked out here. And actually, let me undo that. Yeah. So you're blocked here, right? And X will just take care of who he needs to take care of. So that's what we're talking about. You're moving the offensive line to the left, right? And the running play in this case, if it was a stretch or an outside zone run, would be designed to go outside. But if these defenders, right, over pursue, right, and they get over here in time to stop that, then guess what? That running back is going to use that cutback lane that we talked about, right? Where he's going to look to cut back inside off of that.
Yep.
All right. That's what we're talking about with a wide zone run. Now let's back it up a touch. We're showing you now how these defenders will get, taken out of place, right? And they're going to line up just like that with a mock and a wheel there in a nickel 4-2-5 here. Let's put the left end up on the line of scrimmage. So essentially you're gaining a hat. Now, it's not about necessarily stealing a gap. It's about gaining a hat, meaning this left end ain't even getting blocked because he's out of the equation, right? So now imagine this defense starts to key in on this, all right? And, they're starting to attack now, right? They're all coming downhill. They're attacking the outside zone. They're even getting gaining gap integrity and covering the cutback lanes, right?
That means it's time to break out the boot.
Exactly. So when you break out the boot, and let me explain when you talk about a boot scheme, which was Jerry's question, let's take this block off these guys now, right? And we'll even add a route into Y here in a second, seeing how that's set up. But now let's run the bootleg with the quarterback. And what we mean by bootleg, this is all this means, Jerry, is you're going to fake the handoff to the running back, and then you're going to boot out the backside. Okay, so now you got the whole defense looking our left, their right, over pursuing, and now you can get really creative, have the slot run like a mid climb. You can have the Z give you a dig. You could stretch the field vertically with the X, or even bring him back on a hitch if you wanted to. Let's just keep him as stretching the field vertically here, right? So your running game is displacing all of these players on defense and getting them to flow towards the sideline, and then you're bootlegging off of it. Now, here's what's really cool is, Y is going to set up as a run block here, but then at the end of the play, he's going to break up and have an underneath route as well. Okay, so here's how you're attacking the defense. You're getting this entire defense to flow to your left and take themselves out of the play, okay? And you're going to be attacking underneath here. You're going to be attacking in the mid-range here. You're going to be attacking here if the middle of the field stays open. You've got a window open there. Each of these routes have 2 windows, by the way. We won't go that in depth. And then, of course, you got the shot play up here. So you're attacking 4 different spots on the field on the weak side of the formation already, and then also on the negative hat count side of the play, because you've got the defense flowing completely away from where you're looking to pass the football. All right. That's what we mean by boot scheme. Now, again, let's back up and talk about the coaching for a second, okay? We told you that Kyle Shanahan implemented West Coast offense with a wide zone boot scheme, okay? Shanahan, when he leaves Denver, later on, he ends up going to Washington. Well, his son is now on the staff, okay? That's Kyle Shanahan. Tell you who else is on that staff. Tight ends coach Sean McVay. Quarterback coach was Matt LaFleur, if I remember correctly. You got all of these different guys. Now, there was a couple stops in between. I want to say they went to Houston with Kubiak after this, but it might have been before. That gets a little muddy to me. We could dive into it and do a write-up if you guys wanted us to. But nonetheless, you got all this staff that went over with Mike Shanahan and with Kyle Shanahan. I'll give you another name, Mike McDaniels, and I've talked about this a lot, the Miami Dolphins head coach, okay? He's real good friends with Kyle Shanahan. Do you know where they met? They were actually both the ball boys in Denver when they were just teenagers. So they grew up in this scheme, right, and then got their own opportunity. So now you had Kyle Shanahan, who ended up taking a job in Cleveland after Washington, I believe. And then he goes to Atlanta, and they had a great offense that year that they went to the Super Bowl and crapped the bed there against the New England Patriots. Well, he ends up getting a head coaching job with the San Francisco 49ers. And he takes people with him from that offense, right, from his staff. So now you got San Francisco running that scheme. Sean McVay gets a head coaching job with the LA Rams. He takes LaFleur with him. Then LaFleur leaves after 1 year, goes to Tennessee. Then he gets the job in Green Bay, right? So you have Mike McDaniel, who was the run game coordinator, who was with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. He ends up getting the head coaching job in Miami. Now, here's where it breaks off a little bit. When Sean McVay got to the LA Rams, that first year, he said, I wanted to run 12 and 21 personnel like Kyle did in San Francisco because he had use check. He said, but I kept looking up, and my best players, my best set would have been 11 personnel. He said, I'm looking up at Cooper Kupp's on the bench. Like, wow, one of my best players on the bench because I'm forcing this personnel of 12 or 21 personnel. So he went to 11 personnel, and that's why I showed this play in 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers, because Matt LaFleur runs the McVay system. He does not run the Kyle Shanahan system. Terminology similar, same passing concepts, all that, but we like to press into 11 personnel as opposed to 12 and 21. That could change this year. And when you drafted Luke Musgrave, it would kind of make you think they were looking at going in that direction. But, Musgrave's been hampered with injuries, and you just kind of stay pressed into 11. So, and that's why I tip my cap, Tim, to Matt LaFleur, because when he came over, he's coming from the wide zone West Coast boot scheme, right? Yep. And then he steps into a roster that's built for a West Coast spread offense.
Right.
Rather than him being all egotistical.
Closer to the old 49er offense, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the other thing. Mike McCarthy came from San Francisco, West Coast spread, right? Yep. So you could see that how things have kind of changed. But when he comes over, it would have been real easy for Matt LaFleur to say, scrap it all, we're running my scheme, right?
Yep.
But he didn't. He looked at the roster and said, okay, it's going to take a few years to flip this thing. Went to Aaron, and I know people like to think that Aaron Rodgers threw his weight around. He wouldn't run the plays. And that couldn't be further from the damn truth. It's embarrassing that Packer fans have convinced themselves that's what it was. So he goes to Aaron. He goes, it steps in there with that roster and goes, okay, let's keep some of the McCarthy offense and let's start to implement some of my principles, right? And then lo and behold, the RPO game took off with Philly when they won the Super Bowl. Guess what? Matt LaFleur, being the great coach in the copycat league it is, he said, hey, let's implement some RPO. And that was perfect for Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, and they really pressed into RPO. Well, since then, Tim, they've gotten into duo, right? And again, the game is just –
I wouldn't be surprised to see a mix in the RPO game again, too, because Jay Love is certainly capable of running that. So you're right. It is a copycat league, and it's tough to stay fresh and original all the time. So you got to constantly mix it up for sure.
Right. And again, it's like last year, why didn't we have more bootleg? Well, you pressed into duo more than you did outside zone because you signed Josh Jacobs, but also Jordan Love's knee was injured most of the year. So it's harder to get under center. So you stayed in the gun more often and ran duo out of the gun a little bit more. So they may get back to some more wide zone, although that's not what Josh Jacobs does well, right? So you can run boot action off of inside zone. You can run boot action off of anything. You run it off power if you want to. You're down an extra hat or two, and if the defensive line reads it, your quarterback's going to get killed, right? So you got to take all that stuff into consideration as well. But I'll pause right there for a second, Tim, and grab a drink of water. Anything you want to add to this? Anything that piques your interest?
Just real quick, I stumbled on basically Shanahan's breakdown of his playbook here. Shout out to Sumer Sports, SUMER Sports.com. Shanahan's schemes, it's kind of interesting, kind of breaks down some of those similar principles we talked about. You can see the Oscar package up here, a couple of plays. Really, really cool article here, in-depth kind of breakdown of kind of what's going on there in the
you see the boot action there, Tim?
Yep.
It's all over the place, right?
All over the place. So this is like the most recent of what's available to us, basically. And I'm sure these aren't exact playbook images or anything, but kind of gives you an idea. So check out sumersports.com.
And you'll notice in Shanahan's offense, he's got the F that moves around a lot. The F is that guy that's constantly moving. That's Juszczyk, right? Back in his prime, he would line up in the I, then he'd bust out as a U, although they'd still call it an F. When we refer to F with the Packers offense, the moving point of McVay and LaFleur's offense, the F in that offense is a wide receiver. That's essentially a slot receiver, a moving Z. We just refer to it as F. Probably easier if we just called it slot and Z and just identified who motion. But I wanted to point that out because when LaFleur got hired, everybody's like, yeah, the F's going to be a tight end, the tight end. I'm going, I don't slower roll. It may be the case, but sure enough, we pressed in and it's like, nope, this is McVay's scheme. So, and he likes to use some 12 personnel too. Don't get me wrong with Higbee and those guys out there. So, but we really, really pressed into 11 because you got to get your best 11 on the field, man. So if 11 personnel, if that's your best 11 players, is 3 wide receiver sets, 1 tight end, 1 running back, then stick to it.
Yep.
So, all right.
This receiving is tough.
I appreciate you pulling that up, though, Tim. That's really cool, man. And again, there's so much stuff out there that we can get our hands on. It's just a matter of taking the time to understand it and learn it. And in no way, shape, or form am I professional. I'm still learning every day. And that's why when we do Chalk Talk, I tell people in the chat, if I get something wrong, call it out, fellas. Because that's the other thing. Like, the terminology is different from offense to offense. It's not only is it different from offense to offense, you can run the same wide zone boot scheme, and the terminology from Shanahan would be different from LaFleur, and LaFleur's would be different from McVay, and on so on and so forth. Now, you'll hear different terms that we'll throw out, and I try to find the people that have the most pelts on the wall, your Greg Cosell's, the guys that have been studying film. If I hear them call something like we used to refer to as yo-yo down here.
Now it's zipper, right?
Yeah. Teaching clinics, coaching clinics here in Tennessee with high school football is referred to yo-yo, right? Which is that zipper motion where a guy will motion over and then come back, right? So once I heard NFL coaches calling it zip, I heard, our boy Greg Cosell calling it zipper. We call it zipper now. So whatever your terminology is, everybody's a little bit different. Don't get hung up on that. Just get hung up on learning the game. That's the thing you should do, man. So it's a blast. It really, really is a blast. Now, I'll tell you, anything else you want to add to that, Tim? I
think that was awesome. Little deep dive there.
Yeah, and it's a great question by Jerry. Thank you so much, Jerry, for asking that. Love that topic. Anytime I can blame someone else for me geeking out over X's and O's, I'm going to jump at the opportunity because I know people get tired of hearing that type of stuff. But
that's why you started the Patreon group. I get it.
Exactly. It's like, please, somebody give me some X's and O's to talk about in here. So, and again, I can understand it could get boring on the pod too, and that's why we try not to do it too much. But it's worth it to take a look at that stuff, man. That's how you truly learn for sure. So, all right, Tim, talking about the wide zone boot scheme, one of the vital aspects of it, we just showed you on that diagram, the tight end blocking and then leaking back out the other side on that boot. That would be called a boot slide is what we would call that. And again, some other people call it something else. But the tight end is so important in this offense. It is so important. We just recently got this video clip from Up and Adams with Kay Adams and Mercedes Lewis being on there. And they were talking about how him and Matt LaFleur were so close, right? That's not a joke. Like they were, let me tell you a joke. I heard Wildy tell this story the other day that Matt LaFleur was so fond of Mercedes Lewis, right, that his coaching staff bought a gag gift for him for a birthday gift. They bought him a Mercedes Lewis jersey. So it kind of bust his chops. Like, man, you really love this dude, you know? And it's funny too, because when we were looking at keeping Mercedes Lewis or even keeping around an extra year, people were blaming Rodgers because Rodgers liked him so much. Well, Rodgers and Matt LaFleur were lockstep. I mean, lockstep. That's why I got so much respect for Matt, because as soon as we made the decision to move on from Aaron, he didn't throw a fit. He was just like, all right, it's going to be harder, but let's.
And even before that, you know, first time head coaching job coming into an organization with a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. Like you said, you talk about the nuance with the offensive approach and the scheme. It says a lot about Matt LaFleur and his ability to kind of adapt his scheme to what Aaron was comfortable running and what we had been running. And, you know, the rest is history, man. He doesn't get enough credit. He really doesn't. Yeah,
for sure, man. He was just in a locker room. They said they put his locker right in the middle of the locker room. You think anybody's going to buck on that big dog?
Big dog.
Yeah. So when you got someone like that looks like a damn professional bouncer, and he's lockstep with the quarterback and the coach, that's how you hold a locker room together. And I know Aaron got a lot of flack for, you know, being a bad locker room guy, which couldn't be further from the truth, right? It is funny that Mercedes Lewis leaves, Aaron's gone, these guys are gone, and you're starting to get these little hiccups in the locker room. It doesn't mean the building's on fire, but you just get these little brush fires here and there, right? It's important to have a veteran presence. And I think Josh Jacobs, could you imagine how quick the locker room could get out of hand if you didn't have Josh Jacobs? So got to tip your cap to Goody for that signing for sure.
Absolutely. Like I had said that numerous times that it sucked to see Aaron Jones, you know, leave. But man, if you're going to replace him, what a excellent replacement in Josh Jacobs, because you're not missing out on that veteran leadership. And there's a lot of character qualities that I think both Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones share. They're both high caliber dudes, stand-up guys. So you're absolutely right, though. Having the youth and, you know, all that energy is great, you know, high ceiling and everything, but you need a few vets in there, both sides of the ball, to kind of just stabilize things in that locker room for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. J. Cole says, bring Mercedes Lewis in as a tight ends coach. I would be all about that. Not that you want Coach Dunn out of the building, but just bring Mercedes in to be his assistant. You can never have too many coaches, in my opinion, man.
Yep.
So I'd be all about that, man. You sign me up for that. I don't care what the salary would be either. It sounds like Mercedes wants to play another year, though, which is wild.
Probably one more. Yeah.
41 years old, Tim. That's crazy.
You know, he's a guy that I could totally see. Maybe he retires after, you know, if he gets picked up, plays this season, right? One more year, plays another year, hangs it up. Maybe he takes a year off. And I would not be surprised at all if Mercedes Lewis was right back in an NFL facility as an advisor or a coach or something in some way, shape, or form, I would think, right? Probably hard to walk away